Hello, everyone. Welcome again to another episode of the Backyard SportsCenter podcast. No, it's been a little bit of a break since last recorded the previous episode, but we are back at it with the new year and really excited to be bringing you all lots of content relating to all the different leagues and stuff that the Backyard servers have to offer. And today I am joined by DLW of the Backyard Baseball Online League. Welcome.
Thank you for having me on the podcast. It's an honor. We'll get into a lot about the online league. I had a blast this season, even though my team fell off a cliff. But we'll get into it.
So, was this your first season of the online league, or did you participate in some of the previous ones?
No, I had played in the previous seasons. I didn't start in season 0, but I picked up a team towards the end and kind of rushed to get the games in. And so I didn't get to draft that team, playing with like a borrowed team with some players who I maybe wouldn't have picked, but I don't know. And got into season 1 and didn't really know what I was getting myself into. Not sure if I was playing it in the best way, but team and had a full 9 players that were exclusive to us instead of having various forms of a free agent pool to draft from for each game. I think I played much better this season, even though the record doesn't really show it. I didn't make the playoffs, which I thought I could after the draft, but I did feel like I was a player short, and maybe I was right. Maybe I was 2 players short. I don't know, but I did feel like something was missing, and we can get into why in a minute. But with each season, I've had more and more fun, and I think adding previously unplayable characters has unlocked a whole new way to play this game, which I really enjoy.
Yeah, I'm glad that, each season you're enjoying it more. I was just looking at your record, and you were 4-7 this year. And I know it's not the record that you wanted, but I think you played pretty well considering. I also think that the player base that we had this season, obviously we had twice as many players, but also the new players were pretty really good quality, as far as their talent level. And also the people that did play in season 0 or season 1, just had more experience playing too. So collectively the player pool was significantly better.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I could say I feel like I have improved, but so has everyone else. So
yeah.
I think the more we all play this game, the more we're all going to learn about how everyone plays. And the more people that join the server, the better, because then we're exposed to possibly different ways to play, different combinations of players that you wouldn't think maybe would go together and turns out to make a good team. So it'll be interesting to see. I know there's a lot of people who are new to the server that see that there's an online league and want to get in on this. So should be exciting.
Yeah, that's definitely really exciting just to see all the excitement. It's going to be really interesting to try to put all the pieces together, because in any sort of backyard baseball league that I've ever been a part of, or, I've heard the history about, the most players has been 24. We've never gone over 24 players, but based on how many people have been talking about wanting to join, I feel like it's going to be more than 24 players. So that's going to be really interesting, hypothetically, if that situation occurs. What do we do about it?
Yeah, I think there's a way to do it. Maybe you'd have to have multiple leagues going on at the same time, so that would multiple leagues that would not end up playing against each other. So you could have enough players to draft good teams, and you don't end up with, the worst players. I think the worst characters selected. I think one of the biggest issues with season 0 was Gretchen was being used every game. And no offense to Gretchen, but I don't think she was drafted once we opened up the player pool from 61 playable characters to 200 and whatever. So I think that just shows, how poor some of our options were when all of a sudden Marquis Dubois becomes one of your best options with your 6th pick when you close the amount of playable characters. And then this was more you opened it up to have more players. And like I said, Gretchen doesn't even get selected. Ricky Johnson sees more value, which is an interesting thing that happened. And, he was not drafted in the first 2 seasons. He was drafted this season. So, in season 0 and 1, and now he was drafted in season 2. And I believe, I don't have the exact draft board up anywhere, but I believe he was picked in like the pick before mine, which kind of screwed over some of my plans because I was possibly going to go with him in the 8th round.
Interesting. Yeah, a lot of people, Ricky's kind of one of those players that's either like him or you don't like him.
I appreciate his effort. I mean, I feel like the thing about Ricky Johnson in backyard baseball is, okay, baseball's not his game, because in the other backyard games, he's much he's more popular in the other games, I'd say.
Yeah, because like in backyard football, he's has his speed and he's also, one of the best kickers.
Right.
And in backyard soccer, he's just like the mega superstar.
Yeah. And I think the reason why he became someone worth taking in season 2 was that the previously not playable characters, the generic characters, most of them aren't very tall. And something I learned and seems to be confirmed is in order to catch the ball, the main stat is height. And if you want a tall first baseman, and so height was in demand, and I didn't take another player of 3+ height soon enough, and I was stuck with Jillian Payne at first base, which was not, I think that worked out, but then I'm down and out, so.
Ironically enough, in the RBBO league, also Question Monkey was stuck with Julian Payne being his first baseman as well. So it's kind of funny that you both kind of had the same kind of issue.
Yeah, he did tell me that, and I think having Julian Payne at first base makes you more confident than you usually are about if you need to have the first baseman then throw across to third, if that ever is needed, which happened like once or twice and helped me out. Whereas, if I had, well, let's say Ricky Johnson, don't know if he would have made that throw. I know another thing I was possibly considering was taking Annie Frazier in the 7th round, which may have been a reach, except that, again, she's tall, or at least taller. And I didn't go with Annie Frazier. I didn't get Ricky Johnson. I ended up going Ryan Vanderhook in the 8th after those options were not available. So I got a good arm for a catcher, but I didn't really have someone who was like just first base. And I ended up having to use someone who I previously thought of as an outfielder as a first baseman, and then had not very good options in the outfield, which may have been my downfall. But it's so interesting to see height be that crucial of a stat.
Yeah, height is definitely something that people don't necessarily consider until you get into a kind of a competitive setting necessarily.
Right. I think in my draft rankings, which I pulled up, I just made a list. It was basically, I just wrote names down, and like, let's say I'll just start at the top. So like, I had Julie Dunkel as number 1. I didn't have the first pick, but I still like went through and like ranked every player. And so like Henri, kind of the same player. Then I had Leah Wayne. Like I just went like down the list and just had whoever, and it just like, is this person better or worse than the person next to them? And just kind of like made my own list. I didn't just take Viscery's list, although I looked at it, but I tried to make my own rank. In doing that, I put everybody into like 12 tiers and hoped to get like I was hoping like if I could get like 1 or 2 from my first tier, and then a couple from the next tiers, and then hopefully I never got to anybody in tier 12. But some of the people in tier 12 were just characters I just don't like, not necessarily characters that aren't good. So some people who may have been a first or second round pick are actually in my tier 12 because it's just a personal preference. I just wouldn't draft them. But I definitely wasn't thinking.
So you have like a personal vendetta against Barry Bond or something?
I don't want to get into who is there because I don't want, if I draft in future drafts, I don't want people to listen to this and be like, oh, he's not going to draft that person ever. Because I think my opinion on it has changed a little bit. And some of the people who I may have, they're definitely characters I underrated.
I didn't know if it was just the person that's like opposite, like your favorite MLB team, and like, oh, I hate that team, so I'm never gonna draft such and such or whatever.
No, I don't think so.
Because I don't think like younger me would never pick Sammy Sosa because he was on the Cubs, but now Sammy is like, I just care.
I'm trying to think if I'll say that the switch hitters being programmed incorrectly bothers me. That's not like a personal feeling about Carlos Beltran.
And I know now that, like 15, 20 years have passed, there's other reasons why people might not like Carlos Beltran.
It's complicated because he was one of my favorites that was not on my, and then like just someone who I like to watch that wasn't on my team. There was point then he was on my team, and then it's just it like, and then the way his career ends and the controversy with that, I'm still not sure how to feel about it. And I guess we'll find out very soon if how he did in the Hall of Fame voting. I know he got some votes. But yeah, it's a very weird career. It's not like Alex Rodriguez or someone like that, where like it's a debate on like someone took performance enhancing drugs, should that person be in the Hall of Fame? I know like people like Roger Clemens and Barry Bonds and Sammy Sosa, they haven't been able to get that. And then David Ortiz, who while didn't have any suspension but like was known to have taken it, but he's just a fun person that everyone likes, so he got it.
Yeah.
I mean, that seems to be the narrative around it, which I don't mind. I thought he was a great player, but it's just so weird what the perception is around that still, and yet like it just feels so weird that like Barry Bonds set all these records, and you have other people like Sosa and A-Rod and who were close to those records as well.
Some people make the argument, I mean, because, we were really young when this was happening, but like the Sosa versus McGwire, like home run kind of race, those few years were like one of the most exciting times that they ever remember in baseball.
Well, yeah, in terms of the popularity of the sport, it was huge because if you watch games like back from like the 95 season, there's like no one in the crowd because the perception of baseball was so negative coming out of a strike where they canceled a World Series. So then 3 years later, people are filling up Busch Stadium and Wrigley Field to see home runs. That's what brought it back. That's why MLB was able to make a game with Humongous and put the MLB players in as kids, and kids wanted to play this game.
It's kind of crazy how that all kind of like comes full circle with that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think back to when I played this game as a kid. Once the pros were introduced to these games, like, I think as a kid, I rarely would have chosen a backyard kid over a pro because it was like, oh my God, I can have Mark McGwire on my team. I can have Derek Jeter on my team. I can have Sammy Sosa. I can have Randy Johnson. It was awesome. I could have Mike Piazza, but I couldn't put my finger on as a kid why he wasn't good at catcher, but I knew that he wasn't a good catcher. And now with all these advanced stats, I know why. I know he's a first baseman. But yeah, like to have Ken Griffey Jr. and man, they animated his swing so good in this game.
Yeah, the other thing is like, by playing it, you just, especially like the, 01 and 03 versions, you learned about all these players that, weren't on your team, on like your favorite, team that you're just rooting for. So you learn more about the other teams and the entire major league, and I'm going to watch the Yankees because Derek Jeter's on the team, or whatever.
Right. And so I think that is like a cool part of it is like these players, especially in 01 for me, are somewhat attached to these teams because of this game. Because there's only one representative for most of the teams, except Cincinnati. But, it's like the only reason why I have a memory of there being a time that A-Rod was on the Mariners without Griffey and Randy Johnson was because A-Rod was the Seattle representative for this game, and Griffey was on the Reds, and Randy Johnson was on the Diamondbacks. And so I know there was that, there had to have been a season in between before A-Rod goes to Texas.
And also because in 03, he's the Texas representative.
Sure. Some of the people have switched teams by then, yes. And he was definitely one of them. I think Giambi would have moved by then. My memory of 03, like I know there was an 03 game. I don't have much of a memory of playing it, and I wondered why until recently I found like my old CDs. And apparently, I own 03 and never opened it.
Oh, wow.
I liked 01. I guess I liked 01, or maybe one of my friends had 03, and for some reason we didn't like it. I don't know. But I did have version for the PlayStation 2, which might be like an '05 or something.
Oh yeah, the 2005 is what is the PC equivalent of that game.
There, A-Rod's on the cover on the Yankees by then. Okay. Yeah, I know A-Rod's on the cover. He's on the Yankees by then. And I know I played a lot of that game, even though there were less pros, but then you could unlock some.
I really liked 2005. I know that's kind of controversial, but I think that's for me, that's the last game in the series.
In the baseball series or in like all of the backyard series? Because I could probably say both for me anyway.
Probably it's the last game that kind of had the same kind of hype around it that still felt like backyard sports.
Yeah, I remember playing that game a lot. But I also I kind of remember playing soccer. I don't think I ever played MLS. Similar thing, I probably just didn't open it.
I never played the MLS version of soccer.
I remember playing football, but I don't remember being good at it. And now that I see other people playing football, I can see why I was stubborn and wanted to use John Elway. I should say I knew Barry Sanders and Jerry Rice were pretty good, but I wanted to use John Elway as my quarterback, and apparently Dante Robinson is better, so it should have went that way.
Yeah, I remember the 2002 football game and the original football game were really good, and then I think also backyard hockey was really fun.
I liked hockey. I liked basketball. Basketball, I just remember Kevin Garnett was so overpowered. How could you not pick him?
Yep. And Lisa Leslie. I didn't really know too many WNBA players, except for that. I knew who Lisa Leslie was because she was amazing in that game.
Right. Yeah, I think these games were a cool way to introduce the pros to kids.
Do you think, well, this is kind of a general question. Do you think that part of the reason why, I know baseball and some of the other sports, aren't as popular among kids now is, because they don't have, these kind of games, as we did growing up?
I think I don't know. I mean...
baseball more in particular.
Maybe. I feel like a bunch of us who are playing these games who played it as a kid and now playing it again as adults, or maybe there's some people who kept playing it throughout. We're also kind of like the last generation to play outside. Where we had video games, but we also would go out and play baseball.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like there's so many cool things about technology, and maybe we're missing the part where you go out and play. And I remember you remember when Pokemon Go first hit, and then all of a sudden there's just a bunch of kids outside, and it was strange.
Yeah, yeah.
They had a hit game because it got people to, exercise for one, but to go meet other people and go play with them, which was part of growing up for me was being in a neighborhood with a bunch of other kids who were kind of around my age, but we all lived, our houses were all close to each other. And basically one kid went outside and started bouncing a basketball, a bunch of other kids would come outside.
Yep.
That's a memory I have of being a kid, aside from playing a game like this, that I don't know how much that still exists. Now, as for baseball in particular, I feel like there's a lot of conversation on the Discord, who would represent what team if they had a new backyard baseball? And maybe it's tough to limit it to one per team, but I also think that's how you said, that's how you know who's on whatever team. If you don't watch Diamondbacks game or you don't watch a Red Sox game, I'll pick two on opposite corners of the country. And then, you learn about who Randy Johnson is, or you learn about who Nomar Garciaparra is. And then maybe you want to watch that game one day, see that team one time. I think that was pretty cool. But also part of this game was the personalities of the backyard kids. And I don't feel like even in video games nowadays, there's as memorable personalities as a Dante Robinson. And I don't know what that has to do with baseball exactly, but we part of the games, these video games are so memorable to us. Our memories of baseball with, seeing Sosa and McGuire and Bonds crush home runs was cool for a time. I don't know. I've kind of circled around to say I don't know. But part of liking baseball for me was like a lot of my family are big baseball fans, so like I just kind of grew up in it and took a liking to it from a very young age, and would have liked baseball even without this game. But I would say I have fond memories of playing this game as a kid. I think a lot of people around our age who aren't as super nerds about it like us remember what it was like when they hit a home run with Pablo Sanchez. And or remember, maybe it's not baseball for them, but maybe they remember basketball, or maybe they remember soccer or football. And anytime I've like brought this up to someone, they're like, whoa, like you can still do that, like play online. And I didn't even know they had a way you could play online. And they'll talk about Pablo or Keisha or some other character they remember. And like I just don't, I don't know. It's like playing this game just like feels like I'm like back like being a kid again. And maybe part of it is just like all the characters are so smiley.
I think part of it is like, I don't remember like any other game where like the characters are so like their personalities are so rememberable.
Oh yeah.
And they're actually like humans / kids or whatever. Because like, I mean, obviously like kind of like the other kind of games surrounding that, like there's like the Marios and the Sonics and some of the other, and then there's also like all the shooters or whatever. But those aren't really like, there's not really personalities behind those like shooting games. The only are there. Everything else is basically like like Mario, and they're humans too, but others are like animal related.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you get like attached to like Master Chief in the same way as you do like the backyard kids. Like, but I also feel like when you're a kid, they made the kids diverse enough. You could play this game, and maybe one of the kids is somewhat like you or like some of your friends. Maybe you know someone who's like obsessed with baseball, like Stephanie Morgan or something. Like someone who's like seemingly like always sick,
yeah,
like Mikey Thomas or something. Like there's something about a character or that from this game that like reminds you of someone you knew was in your class with you or something. And there's 30 of them, so it doesn't have to be one. Like this game doesn't have like one main character. You can pick your team from all these characters, and maybe you like Keisha, maybe you like Dimitri, maybe you like Pete, maybe you like whoever. They all have such great personalities. And then I feel like in this one, adding as many pros as they did to have 31 new characters on top of the 30 that were in the original Backyard Baseball and the other backyard games as well. Then you learn about the pros as well. And like I remember about a year ago when I first found out about, hey, we can play Backyard Baseball online again. I went to like the screen where you can just like meet the players.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about? And like I kind of remember Derek Jeter says a line about like chicken parmesan, and then I clicked on him and he said it, and I'm like, yeah, see, I knew it, and like I remember some of the things they said in those little things where you click on them.
Yeah,
it just unlocked so many memories to like open the game again, and that's not even like playing it, just like all those little
nuggets of just nostalgia,
lines of voice. Yeah. And like having the stream a couple months ago we had the charity stream with some of the voice actors, and just to hear like a couple of words and be like, oh my God, that's Vinny the Gooch 100%. And like, it just, some of these voices, like hadn't heard them in a while, but when it came up, it was immediate.
Yeah, that entire stream just,
I know,
blew my mind. Like, just like if you would have told me like when I was playing this game as a kid that you would actually be like kind of like interviewing some of the voice actors from some of these iconic characters, like I don't even know like what young me would have said. They would have like, you gotta be kidding, this is real life.
Yeah. I mean, I was playing in one of the games, so I had to like go back and listen to it back to hear what some of the people said. But like, yeah, to hear and like these are not characters that have continued. These are characters that haven't existed and they don't go back in the studio and record new lines for Ahmed Khan, right? But they remember the voice, and that was a trip
for sure.
So we started to talk about the draft and kind of went off and
yeah.
been talking about how much we love the backyard games, but I have my team lineup and I have like my draft rankings up. I'm not going to go through exactly like all of the people, like exactly how I ranked everybody, but I can go through like one by one and let you know like how I felt about the draft at the time and then like how I feel about it now.
Yeah, so I have your team pulled up.
Uh-huh.
You drafted Derek Jeter, Emily Lubel, which is the Larry Walker clone.
Yep.
Sonia Hagen, Luann Louis, Julian Payne, which is the Jeremy Burnitz clone, Ramona Bennett, Mariana Ralph, Ryan Vanderhook, and Tatiana Jackson.
Yep. So going through the draft, I was looking. So I kind of mentioned like Julie and Henri are 1 and 2. Sorry, those of you who love Pablo. Some of the non-playable characters are actually seen as a little bit better. But Pablo's a valid first-round pick. It's not like he's that far down. And pick came to me, and I don't have the draft board up, but I believe Griffey had been taken, but Susan Gore, who is the Griffey clone, had not. And I technically had Griffey and Gore ahead of Jeter. Like Gore was like 1 ahead of. But I went with Jeter thinking, just based on how people would be drafting, that there would be a chance of getting Larry Walker in round 2. And I felt like Griffey and Walker are similar players. I also feel like Jeter and Mondesi are seen as similar players. And I didn't feel like Mondesi would be available in round 2. There's a bit of a personal bias in picking Derek Jeter, but I also thought I don't want like 2 of the same player. I'd rather have players that have different strengths than have too much of the same. So I went with Jeter round 1 and was able to get Emily Lubel, who is a Larry Walker clone, in round 2. So that part worked out. And I mentioned earlier I had like tiers of players. I had 12 different tiers. And both of them were in my tier 1. And I was pleasantly surprised to find Sonia Hagen available at round 3, as she was also in my tier 1. So I ended up with 3 players in my tier 1 in my first 3 picks. And tier 1 consists of, I'll make a quick count here, 25 players.
Oh, so that's a decent amount.
Right. So I did mention earlier, like, there's some people who might have been first round picks that were actually, like, I just didn't want to take them at all, so I just put them in my last tier. But there's also people who I definitely underrated. But at the time, I was happy with Sonia Hagen. She's got power. She's 100 stamina, decently fast. And based on the fielding stats, thought she'd be okay. Probably be corner outfielder, second baseman, third baseman. Wasn't sure yet because I didn't have a full team yet, but there seemed to be a lot of options. I think at that point, I didn't have enough of a team to know where exactly she'd fit in the field. Turns out, no matter where I put her, she sucked. But we can get to that. By the time I got to round 4, now not every tier had 25 players. They weren't all, like, tier 2 was very small, but so they weren't like balanced exactly in that way. But I had to go down to tier 4 to find Luann Louis, who I picked in round 4. Now, Luann, I had in season 0 and who I had liked before that, but kind of soured me on using her in season 1. Although in season 1 I picked Markey, so I wasn't really in the market for a pitcher until I saw how Visery was using Luann not as a pitcher in season 1 and thought maybe she has some value if she's not pitching, she's not losing stamina, and then you could use her speed on the base paths much more effectively. But then I end up picking her as a pitcher with that in mind in this season, because as I found, when she's not pitching, she's hard to place in other places in the field. We mentioned Julian Payne was my 5th pick, was also in my tier 4. Julian Payne is the Burnitz clone, and I liked Burnitz a lot in season 1. Wasn't one of my picks, but was one of my top, probably my top free agent pick. I really thought highly of Burnitz, and I think Julian Payne was a pretty good pick for me. I mentioned having to use Julian Payne at first base, which wasn't what I thought at this point in the draft, but I did end up liking how that worked, except I still would have liked another player of 3 height. At this point, I don't pick another player of 3 height or more. My 6th pick was Ramona Bennett, who was apparently one person after Julian Payne in my rankings. So I ended up 3 tier 1s and 3 tier 4s, and I thought I was doing well. I noticed Ray Tran, who was similar skill of Ramona. I think they're close to being clones. of each other. Ray Tran went way after Ramona, so I thought maybe I drafted Ramona too high. I thought Ramona turned out okay, kind of a second pitcher option because Luann doesn't have the stamina to pitch the complete game all the time. And Ramona turned out to be pretty good at the plate, more of a contact hitter than a power hitter, but got some extra base hits sometimes. Then here's where things kind of took a turn. I didn't really mark down specific needs of what all the players were. I just had a list. And so I think that's what kind of had me go in the direction of maybe I need another power bat. A lot of people were saying my team at this point didn't have a lot of power. At this point, people are starting to make projections. I'm starting to play scrimmages with with 2/3 of my team, trying to figure out what other people I need. Mariana was one of the people I tried. I also had Annie Fraser in mind. I think I mentioned that earlier. And I played a lot of scrimmages against Gonzos, who picked Annie Fraser eventually. So I think me playing against him as Annie Fraser may have made Annie Fraser's stock go up. But I liked Annie Fraser as someone with height and low aggression. So as a first baseman, I'd rather, in most cases, the first baseman go to first base than to go after the ball. You hit a ground ball to the first base side. Sometimes the first baseman goes so far away to try to get to the ball, even if really the second baseman or the pitcher ends up getting it, they don't get back to first base in time and the runner's safe. So I thought I might be able to get Annie Fraser, and she might stick around to my 8th round pick, and that did not work out. So I went Mariana Ralph. She was okay. I think she did better in scrimmages than in the actual season. With no first baseman options left, I looked at who has the good arm. I need to make sure I get a catcher before those are gone. And I picked Ryan Vanderhook, who was way down on my tier list in tier 11. I didn't rate him that highly for anything else, but I knew I needed a catcher. And I didn't want to be stuck with Jeter or Lubel at catcher after realizing I'm probably stuck with Payne at first. And then I picked Tatiana Jackson in round 9, who I think someone went through the whole draft and rated that Tatiana Jackson was the worst 9th round pick. I just want to say in a scrimmage, I hit a home run with Tatiana Jackson. She didn't do well in the actual season. I think she only got 3 hits. Vanderhook only had 2 hits. Mariana Roth, 6 hits. They were all singles. So power that she had in some scrimmages, I definitely saw some home runs in scrimmages with Mariana. Just didn't happen in the season game. So after the draft, I did feel like I was a player short. I think in the season, those final 3 picks just didn't deliver for me. And there was some power available late. I was scrambling to get a catcher. Maybe I didn't need Mariana in the 7th, and I could have had power. Maybe I would have had less of a catcher come up in the 9th round. And Sonia Hagen, 3rd pick, only had 4 hits. Now, 2 of those were home runs. But in the field, man, I started off, I think she was more often my 3rd baseman earlier in the season. I think my last 2 games, I moved her to center field. It just felt like no matter where she was always dropping the ball. And I thought, 72 coordination, 77 arm, 56 throw, didn't look too bad. 89 eye doesn't look terrible. I have much worse fielders on this team, and Sony just didn't deliver. And it was really disappointing. I mean, the season it looked good at the beginning. I remember going into after my first 2 games, I didn't let in any runs. People thought, the Yankees are going to be good, and won the first 4 games, and then fell off a cliff and lost the next 7.
Yeah, what it definitely looked like, just looking at the stats and everything about your season, the biggest thing would be that you just didn't score enough runs.
No, I didn't. No.
16 runs in 11 games, that's like a run and a half a game. That is probably the limiting factor, because just based off of looking at your team that you drafted, looked like it was a pretty solid defensive lineup, especially with Jeter and Lubel. I probably wouldn't have not risked a late round pick just on trying to get a catcher. I would have been fine with having Lubel at catcher.
Yeah, I kind of...
Or at least Lubel at catcher situationally, because you really don't need a good catcher unless someone gets on base.
It's true, but I ended up letting a lot of people on base. Yeah, I agree. I know Hunt Stunt, who uses Larry Walker at catcher, told me he wanted someone with higher aggression, higher speed as a catcher, as well as a high arm stat, and drafted Larry Walker expecting to use Larry Walker at catcher. And Hunt Stunt did pretty well. I think that strategy seemed to have paid off this season. I do think there's some interesting games that happened. I mean, the early wins against Schwilly and Matitude were, by the end of the season, looked at as upsets. They were close games.
Both of them made the playoffs.
But I played Willigan pretty well. I played Killerbat pretty well. And I think something bounces a different way. It's possible I could have won those games. I don't think, didn't turn out that way. I'm not really complaining. I think there could have, things go a slightly different way. I could have had one more win. I know the game against Coach Code, I couldn't do anything that game. I really feel like, though, the way the season went in the Front Yard League, there were so many good teams. You know, really, I didn't feel like there was a bad player. I really didn't. I feel like if someone had the right game, they definitely could have won. They could have gone differently. And, you know, you might look at some of the people who are towards the bottom of the standings and see them as much better than how it actually turned. You know, JY Knight just barely missed the playoffs, and the Melonheads the whole season was seen as a top team. So, you know, it's only an 11-game season, but really I felt like there was strong competition throughout the whole league.
I think that's a good kind of a segue as far as how the entire league kind of ended up. Like you were saying, in kind of both of the leagues there, I would say, you know, kind of, we'll start at the Front Yard League since that was the league that you were in this season.
Yeah.
I mean, you pretty much look at, at least, you know, 10 of the 12 kind of coaches you're kind of thinking of, you know, that possibly, you know, they might have a chance to make the playoffs as far as like going into the season. I mean, there's a few players that we didn't know that much about.
Yeah.
But I think that for the most part, that everyone did pretty well. Like Trigatriz, you know, has been around, you know, for...
Yep.
You know, a little bit. I thought he was going to do a lot better than he actually did. You know, JY, between how he's been doing in, you know, scrimmages and stuff, and then also how good he is in the RBBO as well. That's one of the players that you were expecting to do pretty well, and he did do pretty well. And then Freak Show came out of nowhere to take over for the Rays and ended up making the playoffs.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Which, you know, no one could have expected that to happen.
No, I think Freak Show played a great season, especially for a team that they didn't draft. I think Trigatriz just had some bad luck early. Because by the time I played Trigatriz, and I think that was Trigatriz's first win of the season was against me. But I just think there was just some bad luck. You run against games before me are JY Knight and Willigan back-to-back. And that's tough.
Yeah.
You know, we mentioned JY Knight barely missed the playoffs, but like really was the Melonheads were a very strong team this season. I think it was just some bad luck early, and then by that point, you might play a little differently, knowing you don't have much of a shot at the playoffs. And you know, there were some trades. You know, just going through, Tigers traded away Randy Johnson. Not saying that. Yeah, I don't know how it would have turned out had the trade not happened. I didn't make a trade. You could argue, you know, the way Sonia Hagen's season turned out, maybe I should have, but I felt like Sonia Hagen in the scrimmages did well, and then the games that actually count did not. Mentioned earlier, similarly for Mariana and Tatiana, but I don't know. I didn't make a trade because I felt like I had a chance with the team I had, and it just didn't work out that way. But Trigatriz ended up 2-9, but I'm sure there's some of those games, the score lines are close, probably had a good chance, and just luck didn't go their way.
Yeah, for sure. Moving on to the Backyard League, you got, you know, Battlehammer and Hunstunt.
Mm-hmm.
Both had 9-2 records. Definitely something that, you know, I was not expecting both of those players to do as well as they did going into the season. I know Battlehammer, when we were doing the kind of like the preseason tournament or whatever, he was kind of newer and was kind of struggling in that. So, you know, he really turned it around from that tournament to the actual, you know, season 2 league. So, you know, if you consider kind of the preseason tournament as kind of like his earlier season, you know, it's kind of like the, you know, comeback of the league for sure. And then Visery, Arco Thunder, Loba, and Question Monkey also made the playoffs. We had that huge 3-way tie between Question Monkey, Personizel, and Alex. That's 6-5. And then DJK was 5-6 too. So, you know, those first 9 players in the Backyard League all had really solid seasons as well. So there was a kind of like the majority of, you know, maybe like 18-ish players, you know, you could have made an argument for, you know, that they might have made the playoffs at some point.
Yeah, and I think that just shows how good the competition is. I think having like individual 12-team leagues is a good size for the draft pool we had, where each league, like we had one draft pool for all 24 teams. I think this format worked, but like we were talking about way earlier, if there's more interest, there might have to be a different format, and so not sure how that would affect how the games are actually played. But I really liked the teams that we were able to make with one draft pool, 24 teams.
Yeah, 2014 is what we've always done in the past, and it's always worked. And for one reason or another, we've never had to go more than that. But I guess it's a good problem to have if that ever does happen.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned a bunch of the teams in the backyard league. Yeah, I remember watching some games the Royals had. I felt like, them and the Hornets as well. Those two teams missing the playoffs, doesn't really show how good they were. Both had positive run differentials. I really think parity in the front yard league was so much fun. Like, I mentioned early in the season at wins over Schwilly and Matitude that were seen as kind of upsets when you look back at the season. But, I also lost to Trigatriz. If the way that game played, it didn't feel like it was an upset. I felt like he had the better team that day. And similar with Coach Code. But then, like, I only lost to, I only beat Matitude of the Brewers on what I remember of as a walk-off, but I know it was a 1-0 game. I only lost to Willigan on a walk. These games were very close, and I'm sure, like, not going to go through like every box score of every game, but there were a lot of close games throughout. Definitely in the front yard league, but in both leagues. And that's what made the playoffs exciting so far, is a lot of close games.
I think that's a good segue to go over some of the playoff games that have already happened.
Yep.
So I'm just going to start from the top and work way down, top to bottom, left to right. And so the first game that we had was the 5th seed of Loba playing Arco Thunder. So the initial round was the 4 seed plays the 5 seed, and the 3 seed plays the 6 seed in both the backyard and front yard leagues in a 1-game play-in. And then the winner of those will play on the semis in a best of 3 against the 1st seed and the 2nd seed, respectively. So Loba was the 5th seed, Arco was the 4th seed, and Loba ended up beating the Expos 10-7. Explosion of runs.
Oh, yes.
Game was more of a blowout than the final score says, but that was a lot of home runs that game.
There was a lot of home runs. Steel Stadium is a favorite for those who like to see home runs. Short porch and center. People like to aim for the swimming pool and left. Loba, I mean, there's players on the Marlins who did not hit a home run in the regular season that were crushing it in this play-in game. And, man, the Expos looked so far out of it and had a rally in the 6th to make it close. And there was a defensive change late by Loba that I feel like helped them. But man, Loba with that 5th seed, I should mention, he picks Diana Hayes 9th round, and she proved to be one of the best pitchers. And I think that's what's helped him out get as far as he has.
Yeah, for sure. Especially historically, this game is out of the norm for Lobo. He usually has a lot of low-scoring, close games. And, this game was, totally out of the norm for it. But you end up winning that game to advance to play the 1st seed in Cotines. And then the other play-in game for the backyard was the 6th seed Question Monkey playing the Blue Monsters of Visery. And the Wombats ended up winning that game 5-2 in a matchup of the league admins.
Yeah, admins going at it in that game. Question Monkey ended Visery season early, man. Both of these teams, again, really good in the season. Both of these guys like the, playing on an asphalt field. So many good seasons, but you get to that one game play-in and someone's got to go home.
Yeah, and this game was at TCA as well, so more runs than kind of, the average kind of game.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly, I think the McGuire clone hit a few, power. I think she had like a triple that scored a couple of runs as well. So I think that was kind of like the MVP of that game.
Yeah.
So the Wombats moved on to play the 2nd seed in Coach Hunt Stunt. So in the backyard semifinals, which both of these have been completed as of when we were recording this, Loba played Hines, which just recently happened last night. Both extremely low-scoring games, more in line with what is traditionally a Loba game. Loba swept both of those games, 1-0 in game 1 and 2-0 in game 2. Both of those were nail-biting, low-scoring games. Anyone could have won.
Close games, dirt yards, and yeah, Loba getting just enough to get by, and showed a lot of power in that game against Arco Thunder. Here in these games, showing the pitching and the defense. Very well-rounded team. Picks 1 to 9, all performing. First pick was Chico Pappas, 676 during the season. Man, I mentioned earlier, like, you thought Pablo was good. Chico Pappas is one of those generic players that is in demand in those first few picks. And then, finding Diana Hayes at the end of the draft and using Diana for most of the season on the mound, and he's got a good team and made it to the finals with that team. I can't say it's a total shock just based on how well-rounded the team is, but I mean, the Pirates were the number 1 seed. I mean, you got Pete Wheeler, Raul Mondesi. Tough to see a team like that go out, but they couldn't score against Diana Hayes' pitching, and that's all it is.
I think that sums that up pretty well. And then we had Question Monkey go against Hunt Stunt, who also has a really good pitcher, or some people would consider it the best pitcher in Randy Johnson, I believe. And I think that they, like you mentioned previously, traded for Randy Johnson mid-season.
No. They have Hunt Stunt has Hellerman, which is the Johnson clone. Yes. So Amanda Hellerman, by the way, is the only pitcher used by Hunt Stunt in the regular season. I haven't checked the playoff stats exactly, but I'd imagine there's no relief pitchers. There's only Hellerman, and that's all you need. Hellerman with a 1.32 ERA during the season.
That's pretty good.
Destroying. I mean, in the 9 regular season wins that Hunt Stunt had, only gave up 7 runs. 7 runs in 9 games. If you count the game against the Pirates, it's only another 2 runs. So that's only giving up 9 runs in 10 games. The first game gave up a lot of runs, but that just, if you take the last 10 games, Hellerman was incredible. And that's what we're looking forward to in the final. The backyard final, Loba and Hunt Stunt, Marlins and Mariners. Another great pitching duel.
Yeah, based off of what's been going on, you expect some low-scoring games on paper, especially considering that Game 1 and Game 3 are going to be at Ekman, and those games historically have been low-scoring, long, extra-inning games.
Yeah, low-scoring, possibility of extra innings, be fun to see. Yeah, let's move on. Let's move on to the front yard.
Yeah, as long as we don't have any 28-inning games, I am fantastic.
I can only imagine what that would be like, but I think we'll see enough offense. I don't think we'll see 28 innings. Maybe some extra innings, but not that long.
Yeah. The only reason why I bring it up is so much because I had to experience the torture of that 28-inning game, so
I can imagine. I know. I remember having a game. It wasn't even a league game. It was just for fun, and just went so long, and just I couldn't keep going. It becomes a marathon, and they don't give you much pause time, so you have to stay and play or quit.
Yeah,
there's not really an option to like take a break.
Yeah, but enough about the horror stories of season 0.
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
Moving on to the front yard league, the 5th seed Matitude played the Fishes of El Chris Blanco and ended up winning that 5-2. Matitude's just been on a tear in these playoffs. Griffey's been amazing.
Matitude's got a good team. Yeah, he's got, I noticed he's got a lot of characters from the original playable 61. 7 of his 9 players. And so he has a lot of familiarity with those players, and I think that helps. I think, if you knowing your team well, and some people might know the generics well, he picked a lot of pros, but, a lot of players from the base game, players that are sitting on the bleachers you're able to draft. And, man, Kevin Kawaguchi and those slow balls.
Yeah, Kenny has just been killing it in these playoffs. Just I don't know, like that 100 slow ball with that extremely good 100 or actually it's a 91 slow ball. It's not even 100.
No, it's not.
It's a 91 slow ball with 100 stamina. Just been mowing people down.
No, and he does throw the hooks. He does throw in a heat. It's not just one pitch, but man, is it killer. And, midseason trade, he traded away Gwynn for Giambi. Giambi on the previous team didn't have a hit in 4 games for the Brewers, 455 average. So he was able to make an upgrade and turn a player who wasn't performing on a different team into a key player for his team. I think if you have Griffey, you have a chance. And I mentioned earlier, I had the Burnitz clone. I mentioned how much I like Burnitz. I think very highly of this team. And was able to beat Chris Blanco, who had a pretty good team in the Fishes, but just wasn't enough, didn't get what he needed out of that game. And unfortunately, Chris went home early.
And then the other play-in game in the Front Yard League was Freak Show and the Tampa Bay Devil Rays going against the St. Louis Cardinals and Coach Swilly. A 1-0 low-scoring game. Those play-in games, low-scoring, just have to be on your toes every single pitch, every single at-bat.
Yeah, and you would think Schwilly, who had a very powerful team, would have scored some runs in a play-in game, and didn't turn out that way. I mean, Canseco with a 735 average, Sarah Maxwell a 541 average. Maxwell had 4 home runs, Canseco had 6. Angel Del Vecchio had 4 home runs in the season. Susan Gore also on this team, acquired midseason. You would think this is a team with power. This is a team that could make a run in the playoffs, and just one game and they're out. That's how it goes. This Cardinals team won a game by 21 runs. That's not a typo. That score is real. This is a power hitting team, and just, one game and they're out. But that's how it goes. And man, we mentioned Freak Show taking over a team that they didn't draft, but they've performed very, very, very well.
Yeah, when I was watching that game, I was expecting Canseco or Playoff Angela to show up, and bats just did not show up that day. That's what happens in a 1-game playoff.
Nope. And but shout out to Schwilly. It was a great season.
For sure. Everyone that, signed up, especially all these playoff teams, had amazing seasons, whether they end up, moving on or not. Everyone really had a great time and had their time to shine for the most part at some point during the season. So the Front Yards semifinals, Coach Mattitude and the Brewers played the top seed of Willigan, and in Game 1 won 5-0, and Game 2 won 1-0.
Yeah, here's where I can talk about Willigan and how I felt like in Game 1 got frustrated and wasn't able to perform the way he thought. I felt like watching the end of that game that he was just frustrated, and maybe with a clearer mindset could have put together more of a comeback. But in Game 2 also couldn't score at all. Now, Willigan had Christina Beatty, another pitcher who did not need a reliever this season, pitched complete games, all the games. And, a lot of power on this team. Beatty has power, Mo Vaughn has power, Lindsay Felgate has power, Fabian Callahan has power. Lena Ang, you look at 74 power, she's the one who hit a walk-off home run against me. So I know that that's enough to hit a home run, at least at Parks Department Field number 2. And Zoe Mallory has power. Like, there's a lot of good hitters on this team, and they couldn't put up a run in 2 games against the Brewers.
Kenny on the mound and Griffey hitting home runs.
Well, yeah, like I said earlier, you got Griffey, you got a chance.
Yeah, that was the kind of like the summary of that series. So Magnitude is moving on to the Front Yard finals, and then the last matchup in the semifinals is Freak Show and Killer Bat. In Game 1, Freak Show won with a score of 2-1. This was, if you are been following the games, there was a glitch in center field, and I think what happened was Frank went to the pitcher of the Orioles that Killer Bat normally uses, went to catch a ball that was around third base area, which was Cheryl Reynolds was there too. Frank dropped it. Cheryl tried to pick it up and throw to second to get Dante out, I believe. Yeah, that was Dante, I'm pretty sure. Ended up overthrowing the second baseman's head and went into center field. And for some reason, Ruth Prout just legged out for whatever reason, and it ended up turning into an inside the park home run for Keisha Phillips.
Well, sometime this game does some crazy thing. I'll say about Killer Bat, another team, a lot of power on this team. Pablo Sanchez, Cheryl Reynolds, Jane Davis, Frank Thomas, Bobby Bull Green, Gary Allen. You would think you're getting home runs with this team. But in the game that played immediately after recording this podcast, and I think he'll be in for a shock when you can't get a home run.
Oh, that is very true.
At least not out of the park. At least very, very rarely. I think there's a spot down the right field line where you might be able to get it, but man, just a lot of bouncing around that field. I can see why a lot of people like it for offense.
I'm hoping that we get some offense this game.
But man, it's just so quirky. But you know what? That's what we love about this game. I think the quirks of this game are what we love. The Rays have Ricky Johnson. We mentioned Ricky Johnson earlier. He's not the best player, but he's trying his best. He's smiling. He'll play first base. He'll try to hit the ball and run as fast as he can. Put in the effort. But it's in Kent Alley. You can get the ground ball. Through the infield. Maybe hit a wall or something. I think he can do well at that park. And if Ricky Johnson can do well at that park, anyone can do well at that park.
So, do you have any predictions going into this game that's going to be?
I don't want to predict necessarily the game itself, but I'd say the winner of this series has a tough matchup with Mattitude and the Brewers. I've been talking up Griffey for a while. He's a game changer. Kenny Kawaguchi's a tough pitcher to go against. But Killer Bat has the power. Freak Show's got a good roster, too. We mentioned Keisha Phillips. We haven't really mentioned much of that roster. Marcellus Mark, Harry Mark, Faye Marks. Oh, sorry, Faye Dawson. Everybody's a Marks on this team. But yeah,
The team that was drafted by Ace/Lucy Lizard, he is one of the best drafters out of anyone that, as far as the different leagues and stuff. He knows how to draft and extremely well. So it's not like that Freak Show got left with this, terrible team by someone that doesn't know what they're doing. He knows what he's doing when it comes to drafting, and he does it exceptionally well.
Oh, I agree with that. And I think any of the teams that are left have a chance. I think it's tough to predict. I don't want to predict it. I just want to watch it.
And that's what we're going to be doing just within, another 5-10 minutes ago or from now. We're going to finish wrapping this up. So I think that's going to, do it for everything that we have to talk about. Hopefully, everyone is going to enjoy this game between Killer Bat and Freak Show. And, hopefully have a good showing. Looks like Alex is hopping on the call. So
I might join him as well. I was able to do commentary for the play-in game between the Marlins and Expos and the Brewers and Fishes, and that was something I didn't really expect to be a part of, but I jumped in, and people seemed to like the commentary. So I think it's another fun way to get involved with this, and keeps me involved with this postseason, even if my team is not. Sorry to my team, and we couldn't get you there. They're watching at home, all 9 of them, and Teddy, I guess.
They're having a pizza party waiting for this game to start.
What is that? What does it say at home plate at Cement Gardens?
I'm drawing a blank on the name of it, and I'm probably going to get a bunch of hate for that. But
was it like Mike's Pizza or something?
Yeah.
Leave a comment. Someone will tell us.
Yeah, someone will tell us if we're gonna.
I know Moe's Aluminum in Kent Alley.
I know, yeah, Cement Gardens, yeah, and we all know what we're talking about because we'll be just drawing a blank on it.
Well, thanks for having me on the podcast. I could talk about this forever.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, and thanks for, going down memory lane and talking about, how the games, kind of, affected our childhoods growing up, and talking about this, your team, and the summary of how the season went and the playoffs so far. So looking forward to the rest of the playoffs and for the future of the online leagues and servers.
Yeah, I hope to be joining in future seasons. And for those of you listening, we'd love to have you join as well. There's a lot of interest in when's the next season, and I think it's really cool that so many people want to play this game that has meant so much to so many of us. Just the memories of crushing the ball with Pablo Sanchez and hearing that great music as the blimp flies over the field, and we get to keep playing. And I think it's awesome.
Yeah, again, thanks for hopping on, and see you guys on the stream or in the Discord or the next episode of the Backyard Sports Center podcast. So till next time, see you guys later.